Let's talk about Carl Jung, the occult, his psychology theories, and what they can teach us about the gatewalking. So, Carl Jung was a psychologist that started his career in diving into psychology around the same time as Freud. The two of them were actually really good, buddies until they started to have disagreements over different psychological theories. So, I have a bunch of notes, and I'm just going to be reading off of those. They're probably not going to be, sequential in time, but I think you guys would be able to make sense of this kind of stuff. So, um, at 19 years old, he actually held his seances in his own house. He had a lot of experiences with seances and communicating with the dead, and he always tried to find a way to explain it. Trying to figure out what exactly was going on there. In 1898, um, his seance table split in half, and an heirloom that he had, which was a knife, split into four pieces. He actually kept the pieces of the knife as like a souvenir of an experience because he always wanted to understand why that happened. Um, so he founded the Psychology Club in 1916 to study spiritual topics like interactions with those that passed on um, in the physical plane, meaning experiences of seeing or interacting with ghosts or poltergeist activity that happens in the physical plane. And he took part in rituals to learn from the occult. He was actually really fascinated by it. In 1925, the book, which was it's got like a different language name, but it translates to the Seven Sermons to the Dead. I'm gonna try to pronounce it. Sermones ad mortuos. Whatever accent, I have no idea. But it was allegedly transcribed by Jung from his spirit guide. So I think it was printed under a different name, and posthumously, meaning after his death, he took credit for it somehow. Not entirely sure about that, but reportedly he got this information from his spirit guide that did have a name, but I didn't write it down. Um, Jung believed in the collective consciousnesses that connect all members of a species or a group. So one of the things that he referenced, given the time that he was around, was the Aryan consciousness, which was a universal driving force that was tapped into by the Germans to identify with and empower their movement. And then conversely, he also believed in a Jewish consciousness, which is what kind of held together and was accessible by all of those of Jewish descent. So let's see, where did I leave off at? Yeah, the collective consciousnesses that connect all members of a species and was responsible for the spread of universal fears, archetypes, reflexes, and skills. And these archetypes can have influences over human actions and thoughts. And there's been a couple of really interesting observations about collective consciousness. I'm trying to remember the animal, but it was like, anybody want to look this up? That'd be kind of cool because I couldn't find it, but I read about it one time where there was these two groups of, I think it was monkeys, one of them that was on the mainland and the other one that was on an island. And these two populations could not interact with each other given the barrier of water between them. But the monkeys on the mainland were taught how to break open certain foods with like a rock or something, and then conspicuously those on the island started to do it without ever observing those on the mainland. So the theory that Jung would pose is that the collective consciousness is what was able to spread that idea because all the members of that species are tapped into that consciousness. So he saw chakras as centers of consciousness rather than centers of energy. Um, he was very interested in occultism and learned from Zoroastrianism, the Mithraic mysteries, Gnosticism, and Greek and Roman and other mythologies. He was fascinated by this stuff. He became fascinated by alchemy kind of later on in life. A caretaker reportedly saw his form outside of his body and quite far distance away from where his physicality was residing in the last days before he passed. Now, this could be astral projection or something, or psychologically you could say that it was kind of a mess up by whoever the caretaker was. But I tend to believe the former. Next page. So he wrote that he experienced things, quote, which are, so to speak, ineffable, secret, because they can never be told properly and nobody can understand them. And I really love this quote. And the reason why is because everyone's experience with the occult and magic is very individual. Like, I could explain my experiences of the gatewalking and what my visualizations were and what I saw and what I was able to experience. But one, it's personal to me, in that anybody else that goes through the gatewalking is not going to go through the same trials, tribulations, or even visualizations when they go through the ritual that I did. So let's carry on with some more of his theories here. So Jung had beliefs that were a little bit different than Freud. To Freud, libido was like a driving sexual force. To Jung, libido was energy that motivated many behaviors. And the unconscious was a storehouse of personal and ancestral memories. To Freud, it was suppressed sexual desires. I'm kind of glossing over this stuff. If you want to do a little bit more research, you can look into Freud and Jung and stuff like that. Jung also believed that behavior was caused by a mix of past behavior and future expectations. So, I think I've mentioned this in a video before or whatever, but probably in a lot of conversations with my friends, where the consciousness is more of an observer, and it's the seat from which we interact with the world in the present time. Our unconscious, which kind of downloads all the stuff that we've been through, is what kind of drives our choices kind of behind the scenes, given what we have already experienced. The brain is always trying to do things faster and more efficiently than before to increase the rate of survival and to be able to react faster, and more efficiently, so it burns less energy. So the unconscious is a way of fast-tracking those different reactions and thoughts. And the problem is how to unpack those and deal with them when they are maladaptive, such as overreacting to things, jumping to conclusions, past traumas affecting our current things, past bad events that influence how we act in the present. Let me continue. A little bit of phlegm this morning. So, Jung saw the ego as the conscious mind, and it had to do with identity and continuity. So, our self-concept and how to maintain that rather than changing. Because change is very uncomfortable for the mind. That's why it takes a while. And when we are used to doing something in a certain way, it gets more and more reinforced the more that we are able to survive. So that's why changing is difficult, and why the ego is stuck on maintaining the same status quo, and why change is very traumatic, or can be very traumatic and difficult to maintain. So let's talk about the unconscious. There's the personal and the collective or transpersonal. The personal unconscious is temporarily forgotten information like memories, complexes, which are collections of thoughts, feelings, attitudes, experiences, memories focused on individual concepts. And complexes are, the bigger they are and the more associations that are tied to them, the more difficult that they are to change and to break. So if you have a lot of experiences around, like if I brought up the words like work or school or trauma or, I don't know, you name a thing, and then, try this as an exercise. Write down a big topic, and then write down all the thoughts and memories and experiences and whatever you think or feel about that specific thing. All of those little associations, all those things that could be put into that box, are a complex. So when we go through the gatewalking, when we work with Venus, it's about like relationships and love and stuff. When we work through Mars, it's about personal drive, work, and things like that. And Mercury is about like communication, transportation, and money matters, interactions, right? So if I was just to say those topics, you could think of a truckload of experiences that you have had around those topics. So that demonstrates that a concept is a big thing. So when we go through one of the gates, right, we are dissecting everything that has to do with that particular concept. And trials, due to the energies and things that you are invoking, during your time of the gatewalking. I'm not just talking the ritual, I'm talking about afterwards too. In whatever amount of time that you spend in the gate, because you have to obey the movements of the stars and blah blah blah. But different things come up for you that are challenging that concept, and whatever negative associations that you have with it, or negative adaptations that cause you to self-sabotage or think about it in more of a reactive way rather than observing and making your own choices, those are being challenged. So you have to unpack those concepts in order to understand what's going on and why things don't exactly happen the way that you would like them to, and change those things. You guys get that? Drop it in the comments if this is making sense to you and whatnot. So let's talk about the collective or transpersonal unconscious. It's shared with other members of the species. It's latent memories from evolutionary past. It's imprinted stuff from evolution and survival, such as fear of the dark, fear of heights, snakes. Like, we were actually built in with a fear of snakes. That's what psychologists tell us, right? So this can also tie into ancestral things, like, things that are carried down the family line. If you were, and you could attribute this to psychological conditioning or a learned behavior, or you can tie it into ancestral things or the carrying on of energy from one generation to the next. And let me give you a couple of examples, like certain mannerisms that we all do, certain reactions that we all have, or even addictive tendencies, or even disorders and things like that. So, like, my bent fingers, which is my middle finger and my pinky finger. The only other person in my family to have these was actually my great-grandfather on my mother's side, right? So, recessive genes aside from, like, the scientific point of view, you could say that this was kind of carried on through the generations, so it's kind of an ancestral trait. In terms of other things, you could have a proclivity towards addictive personality. Like, if people in your family smoke, you are much more likely to smoke. If people in your family are alcoholics, you are much more likely to have difficulty with alcohol. If you have different family traits of, even dealing with abusive partners, right? You are more likely to find yourself in that situation. Now, that could be psychological conditioning. There's a lot of different theories around what we see in our parents is kind of what we become. We grow up to be like our same gender parent, and we seek out attributes from our opposite gender parent. That's kind of one of the theories there. But the idea is that, those kinds of experiences that others in our family line have, we tend to kind of repeat those things given that programming that's passed down to us both through our genes and the shared unconscious, because we get a lot of things from our parents. Remember, with the gatewalking, it's all about transforming those things and understanding those things. Like, one of those big things with humans is it's all about survival, like, whatever the cost, right? Well, sometimes if we react too quickly, we are kind of thinking more with that reptilian brain, the lower brain, about survival, and we just react rather than thinking our way through things. Let me know how I'm doing. So, let's talk about archetypes for a bit. Archetypes are images, thoughts, symbols with universal meaning that show up across cultures through dreams, religion, art, and literature. You always find, like, the same kind of format in the story, where it builds the story and then it goes up to a climax, and then it cools down. You have the archetype of the hero, other things like that. Now, Jung focused on 4 big archetypes, but he identified pretty much like 20 or more. And so the 4 big ones are actually, let me go on to something else. Primitive past influences present behavior with built-in programming, like a computer with previously installed drivers to recognize speakers, printers, and other things. So, like I was saying, we are built in with certain behaviors. Even suckling is it's a reflex. Nobody teaches us that, but that's how we feed off of our mothers, right? Or even fear of the dark, things like that. Not a lot of kids are not afraid of the dark because it's a built-in thing, because it's about survival. Way back in the day, everybody huddled near the fire at night because the darkness was dangerous, right? So, those 4 big archetypes. The persona, which is our outward appearance we show to people and how we fit in with society. Because everybody knows we act differently when we're alone versus with other people. Then you have the anima or animus, which is qualities of the opposing gender. You know, I'm male, and I have a feminine side where I experience feelings, you know, or females kind of have a masculine quality. So think of whatever your gender is and the opposite of that, and how those opposite gender traits kind of tie in to your attitudes. Now, you know, depending on your individual personality, you know, if you tend to be more like, you know, if you're like a tomboy, right? You still got to look at those masculine, quote, masculine traits that you have, and the quote feminine traits that you have, and see where they balance out. Then we have the shadow, which is our animalistic side. It's kind of like, to me, it's kind of like the id from Freudian psychology, where it's the survival, sex, food, you know, just needing to get stuff done so we can survive. What we primally need, which can really drive us towards overreacting to certain situations and not thinking them through just because we're trying to take the fast track to getting rid of a problem. Because our brain is our survival machine. That's ultimately what it's trying to do. And then we have the self, which is a unity of experience of all the archetypes as balanced things. And Jung kind of tied this into self-actualization, when we're able to balance all of our archetypes and those driving forces that are in the unconscious and collective unconscious, so we can be masters of what we think rather than reacting to it. And I know in my Gatewalking videos, I've talked a lot about becoming the Ancient One, being a master of your universe, being a master of your experience. So whatever happens in your life, you not only intentionally create it, but if something occurs, you take ownership for the fact that it happened, because nothing in your universe happens without your say-so. Even the negative stuff that happens, we kind of attract that, whether we want to believe it or not. There are tons of people that are like, oh my god, everything sucks. Why does this always happen to me? Because you're manifesting it, right? I think I mentioned that in Magical Mechanics, or either that or Magical Theater. Either of my books, but I can just remember, because you manifested it, buddy. Yeah, it's one of the fun lines to write. So, I still got another page here. Phlegm in the morning. Jesus. So let's talk about the way that Jung viewed therapy here, which really ties into the Gatewalking, I think. So, active imagination. You bridge the gap between the conscious and the unconscious. Through undirected observation of imagination or dreams, the patient is able to bring unconscious to the present through action or narrative. Now, this speaks a lot to journeying, or going into deep meditation, like a contemplative meditation where you have a thought and you ask why, and then you generate a response to the thought, and then you ask why to that, and you go deeper. Why does this happen? Why do I do this? Why? It's very Socratic. It's kind of a Socratic method, just trying to figure stuff out, going super deep, and kind of playing things out through a tale or a story can really help bring ideas to life. And the key is to not force it, like when we're telling ourselves a story, that's more of our conscious creating it. So when we go into like a Gatewalking or an astral journey or something like that, I got to get my wifey on here to talk about journeying one of these days. But when you just let those thoughts flow rather than thinking about it, that more or less comes from the unconscious and the collective unconscious that are trying to bring up things that you can explore, think about, and digest. And with the Gatewalking, we are setting an intention to access a certain energy depending on the sphere that you're in, and that brings up those things from the conscious and the collective unconscious in relation to the difficulties that you have with them, so you can observe them, figure out what's going on with that and what you need to change, and then take charge to change it. So let's talk about individuation here. Become who one wants to become. Yeah, this is that more activation of like the the higher self, the self-actualization, if you're familiar with, I think it's Abraham Maslow, the other psychologist guy. It's the top of his hierarchy of needs, self-actualization. When you have everything else in line, you can work on yourself. Let me continue. Progress towards this is blocked or slowed because of inner conflict or sabotage due to segmentation of different parts of the self, acting reactively or different in response to different situations. It involves integrating positive and negative experiences. It allows someone to become unique and separate from other people and the collective unconscious. Master of your reality, being an ancient one like I was talking about. Free from outer and deep inner influences. You make all the choices that you make. You are no longer driven by that animalistic side, and you are able to make all the decisions and everything happen in your life. And if something happens, you understand that you created it, you caused it, and if you don't like it, you figure out how to change it. Then he talked about logos, eros, and nekia. So, logos to Jung, which is different than, I believe, Freud's idea, was fact and reason. Logos, logic, fact and reason. It's kind of a male quality. Then eros, which was actually tied to psychic ability and emotion by Jung, is more of a feminine quality. And then nekia, Nekya, is deliberately exploring one's subconscious, which you can do through, exploring your dreams and looking at the symbolism and then asking yourself, what does it mean to you? Okay, why did that come up for me? Explore that, because your subconscious is trying to tell you something that's very difficult for your logical mind to unpack. Yeah, I'll keep going. Then we have depth psychology, discovering motives behind mental problems. Work to reveal the source of a problem rather than its symptoms, and then work to transform the thoughts around the source to then change the symptoms. So this really ties into the gatewalking too, because when we activate the energies of certain gates, right, things come up for us. Like in the Mars gate, you might have difficulty at work. Why? Because the energies are trying to show you, they're trying to reveal what's going on. They present challenges because it's almost like you become a beacon, a lighthouse for that energy. And when you open up that gate, remember it's both inner and outer, so you're kind of Pandora's boxing it, opening it up and the bad stuff comes out. So what you're doing is making an observation of yourself through journaling and the experiences and whatnot of, okay, in this area of my life, there are these difficulties. Well, why? Maybe because around this sphere of influence, I have had these past experiences. These have turned out good. These have turned out not so good. Why? Was it because I reacted a certain way? Was it because I didn't learn enough? I was not prepared. So how can I do better with that in the future? Oh, I'm afraid of this. Well, why is that? Work your way through it and find out why, and eventually you can understand that your reactions to things is kind of what ruins stuff. If you are comfortable with yourself, then you have a choice of how to react to every situation. You become prepared for everything, and then everything will work out in your favor. And if it doesn't, that's not the universe's fault. That's your fault for not working at it hard enough, and it means you still have more to unpack. I'm not a fan of everybody that says, like I say Murphy's Law all the time or whatever, but I'm a very self-deprecating, sarcastic jerk face. So, it's just my way of working through stuff. Maybe I still got to work on that humor jazz. But anyway, the idea is that everything around us and everything that happens in our world is influenced by our past experiences, whether we react positively or not. And if we apply Jung's psychological theories to the gatewalking, we can see that these influences are what are brought up in the gatewalking for us to transform, to understand, and to change. So, yeah. Let me know what you guys think about my dissection of Jung's theories. I tried to mainly stick to the stuff that would apply to the gatewalking to make this more relevant to the channel, and I wanted to give a little bit of tidbits of Jung's theories, what he thought, and even the idea that he was extremely interested in the occult, which is why he's fascinating as hell to me. So let me know what you guys think and drop it in the comments. You can always email me at priestofthenecro@gmail.com. If you are interested in any of my other videos, you can check out my Necronomicon playlist for how to work with the Simon Necronomicon and prepare yourself and walk through the gatewalking. If you want a workbook that would help you to go through the gatewalking, you can check out my Guide to the Spheres and Beyond on Amazon. If you are interested in general magic, how to build your magical skills, I have a general magic playlist. If you are interested in the psychology and energy of magic and how they work, you can check out my book Magical Theater, also on Amazon. In terms of general magic, you can also check out my book, Handy Sigil Magic, which is my own personal way of incorporating visualization, energetic movement, hand gestures, sigils, and energy to create changes in your life. And if you are interested in how magic exactly works, I got two things for you. You can check out my playlist on the theories of magic, and you can check out my book Magical Mechanics, which is on Amazon. And that one has several theories on how magic works in regards to this physical plane and in our minds and how it functions, what its limits are, what its boundaries are, what it can and can't do. So that's all of my information. I hope you guys like this. If you did, you can give it a like and share it and whatnot. But you can always communicate with me. All my stuff is in the description. And good hunting.